Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966. A biography of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, by Satswarup Das Goswami. Chapter 4. It will not be possible to assist you. I have come here in this old age neither for sightseeing nor for any personal interest. It is for the interest of the entire humanity that I am trying to implement the science of Krishna, which will actually make them happy. So it is the duty of every devotee of Lord Krishna to help me by all means. From a letter to Sumati Morarji. November passed, and December came, and Prabhupada, having obtained an extension on his visa, stayed on. America seemed so opulent, yet many things were difficult to tolerate. The sirens and bells from fire engines and police cars seemed like they would crack his heart. Sometimes at night he would hear a person being attacked and crying for help. From his first days in the city, he had noted that the smell of dog stool was everywhere. And although it was such a rich city, he could rarely find a mango to purchase, and if he did, it was very expensive and usually had no taste. From his room, he would sometimes hear the horns of ocean liners, and he would dream that someday he would sail around the world with a Sankirtan party, preaching in all the major cities of the world. The weather went below freezing, colder than he had ever experienced in India. Daily he had to walk toward the Hudson against a west wind that even on an ordinary winter's day would take your breath away and make your eyes water and your face grow numb. On a stormy day, the driving wind and sudden gusts could even knock a man down. Sometimes, a cold rain would turn the streets slick with ice. The cold would become especially severe as one approached the shelterless, windswept area of West Side Drive, where occasional whirlwinds carried brown leaves and paper trash mysteriously high into the air. Srila Prabhupada wore a coat Dr. Mishra had given him, but he never gave up wearing his dhoti, despite the cold, windy walks. Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission had advised Prabhupada that if he wanted to stay in the West, he should abandon his traditional Indian dress and strict vegetarianism. Meat eating and liquor, as well as pants and coat, were almost a necessity in this climate, he had said. Before Prabhupada had left India, one of his godbrothers had demonstrated to him how he should eat in the West with a knife and fork. But Prabhupada never considered taking on Western ways. His advisors cautioned him not to remain an alien, but to get into the spirit of American life, even if it meant breaking vows he had held in India. Almost all Indian immigrants compromised their old ways. But Prabhupada's idea was different, and he could not be budged. The others may have had to compromise, he thought, but they had come to beg technological knowledge from the West. I have not come to beg something, he said, but to give something. In his solitary wanderings, Srila Prabhupada made acquaintances with a number of local people. There was Mr. Rubin, a Turkish Jew, who worked as a New York City subway conductor. Mr. Rubin met Prabhupada on a park bench, and, being a sociable fellow and a world traveler, sat and talked with the Indian holy man. Mr. Rubin. He seemed to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. He would look out and say, "I am not a poor man, I am rich. There are temples and books. They are existing, they are there. but the time is separating us from them. He always mentioned we and spoke about the one who sent him, his spiritual master. He didn't know people at that time, but he said, I am never alone. He always looked like a lonely man to me. That's what made me think of him, like a holy man, Elijah, who always went out alone. I don't believe he had any followers. When the weather was not rainy or icy, Prabhupada would catch the bus to Grand Central Station and visit the Central Library on 42nd Street. His Srimad Bhagavatams were there, some of the same volumes he had sold to the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. And he took pleasure in seeing them listed in the card catalog and learning that they were being regularly checked out and read. He would sometimes walk through UN Plaza or walk up to New India House on 64th Street, where he had met Mr. Malhotra, a consulate officer. It was through Mr. Malhotra that he had contacted the Tagore Society and had secured an invitation to lecture before one of their meetings back in November. Riding the bus down Fifth Avenue, he would look out at the buildings and imagine that someday they could be used in Krishna consciousness. He would take a special interest in certain buildings. One on 23rd Street and one with a dome on 14th Street attracted his attention. He would think of how the materialists had constructed such elaborate buildings and had yet made no provisions for spiritual life. Despite all the great achievements of technology, the people felt empty and useless. They had built these great buildings, but the children were going to LSD. December 2nd. New York Times headlines. New York City hospitals report marked rise in LSD cases admitted for care. Protest against U.S. participation in Vietnam War mounts. The weather grew cold, but there was no snow in December. On Columbus Avenue, shops were selling Christmas trees, and the continental restaurants were bright with holiday lighting. On 72nd, the Retailers Association erected tall red poles topped with green tinsel Christmas trees. The tops of the trees on both sides of the street sprouted tinsel garlands that spanned the street and joined in red tinsel stars surrounded by colored lights. Although Srila Prabhupada did no Christmas shopping, he visited many bookstores. Orientalia, Sam Weiser's, Doubleday, The Paragon, and others, trying to sell his Srimad Bhagavatams. Mrs. Ferber, the wife of the Paragon Book Gallery proprietor, called Prabhupada a pleasant and extremely polite small gentleman. The first time he called, she wasn't interested in his books, but he tried again, and she took several volumes. Prabhupada used to stop by about once a week, and since his books were selling regularly, he would collect. Sometimes, when he needed copies to sell personally, he would come by and pick them up from Mrs. Ferber. And sometimes he would phone to ask her how his books were selling. Mrs. Ferber. Every time he came, he would ask for a glass of water. If a customer would make such a request, I would ordinarily say, "There is a water cooler." But because he was an old man, I couldn't tell him that, of course. He was very polite always, very modest, and a great scholar. So, whenever he would ask, I would fetch him a cup of water personally. Once, Prabhupada was talking with Mrs. Ferber about Indian cuisine, and she mentioned that she especially liked samosas. The next time he paid her a visit, he brought a tray of samosas, which she enjoyed. Harvey Cohen came often to room 501 to visit the Swami who had so impressed him at Ananda Ashram. Harvey. The room he occupied was a tiny office in the back of the Yoga Society in uptown Manhattan. I began to go there regularly, and we sat facing each other on the floor in this little office with a typewriter and a new tape recorder on top of 2 suitcases. And there was a box of books he had brought from India and a color reproduction of dancing figures, which he looked at often. I told Swami Bhaktivedanta that I was an artist, and he asked me to please paint the picture of the dancers, which he explained was of Lord Chaitanya and his disciples. The painting was called Sankirtan. Whenever I came to visit him, Swami would always be happy to see me. I told him about myself, and we chanted Hare Krishna together in his room many nights that winter. I would get the train uptown from my apartment to go see him. January 11th, 1966. Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died of a heart attack while visiting Russia. The Prime Minister had been a personal acquaintance of Srila Prabhupada's in India and an admirer of his Srimad Bhagavatam translation. He had been scheduled to visit America, and Prabhupada had expected to obtain a personal sanction from him for the release of funds from India. His untimely death was a great upset in Srila Prabhupada's plans to purchase the building at 143 West 72nd Street. The realtors had shown him the building, and he had already mentally designed the interior for deity worship and distribution of prasadam. The money was to come from India, and Prime Minister Shastri was to give personal sanction for release of the funds, but suddenly that was all changed. January 14th. Prabhupada decided to write to the owner of the building, Mr. A.M. Hartman. He explained how his plans had been upset, and he posed a new plan. Quote, "Now, the Prime Minister, Mr. Lal Bahadur Shastri, is suddenly dead, and I am greatly perplexed. Ellipses. As there is now great difficulty for getting money from India, I am requesting you to allow me to use the place for the International Institution for God Consciousness, at least for some time. The house is lying vacant for so many days without any use, and I learn it that you are paying the taxes, insurance, and other charges for the house, although you have no income from there. If you, however, allow this place for this public institution, you shall at least save the taxes and other charges which you are paying now for nothing. If I can start the institution immediately, certainly I shall be able to get sympathy locally, and in that case I may not be required to get money from India. I am also requesting that your honor become one of the directors of this public institution, because you will give a place to start the institution." Unquote. A.M. Hartman wasn't interested. On the same day he wrote Mr. Hartman, Prabhupada received a letter from Sir Padampat Singhania, the director of the very large J.K. organization in India. Prabhupada had written Sir Padampatji for financial support, and his reply gave him hope. Not only was the Singhania family fabulously wealthy, but its members were devotees of Lord Krishna. Quote, "My dear Swamiji, I have gone through your letter. I am very glad to note your idea of erecting a Sri Radhakrishna temple in New York. I think the proposal is a good one, but the following are the difficulties. Number 1, we have got to send foreign exchange for building the temple, for which government sanction is required. Without the government sanction, no money can be sent abroad. If the government of India agrees, then one can think of erecting the temple in New York. Number 2, I doubt whether with this small amount of 7 lakhs of rupees, $110,000. A temple can be built in New York. I mean to carry out a nice construction with Indian type of architecture. To get a temple completed in Indian type of architecture, we have to send a man from India. These are the two main difficulties. Otherwise, your idea is very good." Unquote. Srila Prabhupada and Mr. Singh Hania had a basic disagreement. A magnificent Indian temple in New York would cost many millions of dollars to construct. Prabhupada knew, of course, that if Parampat Singh Hania wanted, he could provide millions of dollars, but then how would they get so much money out of India? Prabhupada therefore again suggested that they spend only 7 lakhs. After purchasing the house, he wrote, "We can build another story upon it with a temple dome, chakra, etc." Prabhupada had his own line of reasoning. Quote, "Lord Dwarkadish exhibited his opulence at Dwarka with 16,000 queens, and it is understood that he built a palace for each and every queen, and the palaces were made with jewels and stones, so that there was no necessity for artificial light in the palaces. So your conception of building a temple of Lord Krishna is in opulence. But we are residents of Vrindavan, and Vrindavan has no palaces like your Dwarka. Vrindavan is full of forests and cows on the bank of the Jamuna, and Lord Krishna in his childhood played the part of a cowherd boy without any royal opulence, as you people, the inhabitants of Dwarka, are accustomed. So, when the Dwarka Wallas meet the Vrindavan Wallas, there may be a vaya media." Unquote. With Sir Padampat's Dwarka-like wealth and Srila Prabhupada's Vrindavan-like devotion, Lord Krishna, the Lord of both Vrindavan and Dwarka, could be properly worshipped. January 21st. He received Ban Maharaj's reply. 2 weeks before, Prabhupada had written to his godbrother, the director of the Institute of Oriental Philosophy in Vrindavan, that he had found a place for a temple in New York, and that he wanted to install deities of Radha and Krishna. In his reply, Ban Maharaj quoted price estimates for 14-inch brass deities of Radha Krishna. But he also warned that to begin deity worship would be a heavy responsibility. Srila Prabhupada responded, quote, "I think that after the temple has started, some men, even from America, may be available. As I see, they have at the Ramakrishna Mission, as well as in so many yoga societies. So I am trying to open a temple here because Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wanted it." Unquote. Prabhupada also requested Ban Maharaj's assistance in getting the government to sanction release of the money he felt Parampat Singh Hania would donate. He mentioned that he had carried on an extensive personal correspondence with the Vice President of India, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was also known to Ban Maharaj. Quote, "Tell him that it is not an ordinary temple of worship, but an international institution for God consciousness, based on the Srimad Bhagavatam." Unquote. January 22nd. While Srila Prabhupada prayed to receive Radha Krishna in New York, a snowstorm hit the city. That morning, Srila Prabhupada, who had perhaps never before seen snow, woke and thought that someone had whitewashed the side of the building next door. Not until he went outside did he discover that it was snow. The temperature was 10 degrees. The city went into a state of emergency, but Prabhupada continued his daily walks. Now he had to walk through heavy snow, only a thin dhoti beneath his overcoat, his head covered with his Swami hat. The main roads were cleared, but many sidewalks were covered with snow. Along the strip of park dividing Broadway, the gusting winds piled snowbanks to shoulder height and buried the benches. The Broadway kiosks, plastered with layers of posters and notices, were now plastered with additional layers of snow and ice. But despite the weather, New Yorkers still walked their dogs, the pets now wearing raincoats and mackinaws. Such pampering by American dog owners left Prabhupada with a feeling of surprised amusement. As he approached West End Avenue, he found the doorman blowing whistles to signal taxis as usual, but also scattering salt to melt the ice and create safe sidewalks in front of the buildings. In Riverside Park, the benches, pathways, and trees were glazed with ice and gave off a shimmering reflection from the sky. In the news, Selective Service officials announced the first substantial increase in the draft since the Korean War. A month-long peace ended with the U.S. Air Force bombing North Vietnam. The New York transit strike ended after 3 weeks, and the transit labor leader died in jail of a heart attack. January 30th. The East Coast was hit by severe blizzards. 7 inches of snow fell on the city with winds up to 50 miles an hour. The city of New York offered warm rooms and meals for people living in tenements without heat. JFK Airport was closed, as were train lines and roadways into the city. For the second time within 8 days, a state of emergency was declared because of snow. As a lone individual, Srila Prabhupada could not do anything about the snow emergency or the international warfare. He saw these as mere symptoms of the age of Kali. Always there would be misery in the material world, but if he could bring Radha and Krishna to a building in New York, nothing was impossible for the Supreme Lord. Even in the midst of Kali Yuga, a golden age could appear, and people could get relief. If Americans could take to Krishna consciousness, the whole world would follow. Seeing through the eyes of the scriptures, Srila Prabhupada pushed on through the blizzard and pursued the thin trail for support of his Krishna consciousness mission. February 4th. He wrote again to Tirtha Maharaj, who had agreed to try for the government sanction if he first received written confirmation from a responsible donor pledging the funds for a temple. Prabhupada informed him that the donor would be Sir Padampat Singhania, and he enclosed Mr. Singhania's favorable letter of the 14th. Prabhupada reminded his godbrother, quote, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta wanted such temples in foreign cities like New York, London, Tokyo, etc., and I had personal talks with him when I first met him at Ultadanga in 1922. Now here is a chance for me to carry out his transcendental order. I am just seeking your favor and mercy in making this attempt successful. Unquote. February 5th. Discouragement came to the plans Srila Prabhupada had formed around the promise of support by Padampat Singhania. The Dwarkavala wrote to express his dissatisfaction with the 72nd Street building. Quote, I am afraid that I cannot agree with your suggestion that you should buy a small house and erect something on top of it. Unfortunately, such a kind of proposal will not suit me. The temple must be a small one, but it must be constructed properly. I quite agree that you cannot spend a lot of money at present, but within the amount the government may sanction, you should build something according to the architecture of Indian temples. Then only will we be able to create some impression on the American people. This is all I can write to you in this connection. I am very grateful for your taking the trouble of writing me. Unquote. Prabhupada did not take this letter as final. He maintained hope that Sir Padampat Singhania would still give money for the temple, if only the transfer of money could be arranged. He continued writing his godbrothers and other devotees, asking them to try to secure the government sanction. He maintained his same aspirations, even though his sole prospective donor had rejected his scheme of a chakra and dome atop a conventional 2-story building. February 15th. He moved from room 501 downstairs 2 floors to a room all his own. Quote, I have changed my room to room 307, in the same building as above mentioned, for better air and light. It is on the roadside junction of 2 roads, the Columbus Avenue and 72nd Street. Unquote. According to Dr. Mishra, Prabhupada moved in order to have his own place, independent of the Mishra Yoga Society. February 16th. Prabhupada wrote to the proprietors of the Universal Book House of Bombay, giving some hints for selling his Srimad Bhagavatam in the Bombay area. He explained that he was trying to establish a Radha Krishna temple and that a big industrialist of India has promised to pay for the cost. Since it seemed that he might stay in the United States for many more days, he wanted the book house to take increased charge of selling his books throughout India. They were his agent for selling his books in Maharashtra, but now he recommended they take the responsibility in all provinces and introduce his books in colleges and universities throughout India. He also requested that they credit his bank account there for the books sold so far. February 26th. Mr. A.P. Darwadkar of the Universal Book House replied, quote, I cannot give you very happy news on the progress of the sale of Srimad Bhagavatam, because the subject is religious and only a small section of society may personally be interested in the books. Ellipses. We tried to push them through some booksellers to Nagpur, Ahmedabad, Pune, etc., but regret to inform you that after some time these booksellers returned the books for want of response. As such, we are not only unenthusiastic to agree to your proposal of taking up sales for all of India, but we were just thinking of requesting you to nominate some other people in our place to represent your sale program in Maharashtra, unquote. So far, they had sold only 6 sets of his books, for which they were about to transfer 172 rupees to his account. This was hardly encouraging to the author. Again, India was not interested. Even in the land of religion, religious subjects were only for a small section of society. March 4th. Another reverse. On February 8th, Srila Prabhupada had written to India's new Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, requesting her to sanction the release of money from India. A reply, dated February 25th, New Delhi, came from the Prime Minister's official secretary, Mr. L.K. Gah. Quote, Dear Swamiji, the Prime Minister has seen your letter of February 8th, 1966. She appreciates the spirit which prompted you to carry the spiritual message of Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to other countries. Owing to the critical foreign exchange situation which the country is facing, it is greatly regretted that it will not be possible to assist you from here in your plan to set up a Radha Krishna temple, unquote. But Prabhupada had other hopes. After writing to the Prime Minister, he had written again to Tirtha Maharaj, asking him to request Dr. Radha Krishnan to persuade the government to sanction the release of funds. He waited for 1 month. No answer. Apparently, his godbrothers felt little obligation toward preaching in America. He had written that he needed encouragement from them to continue in America because it was so expensive. He had explained that he was spending the equivalent of 1,000 rupees a month. As such, I am counting every day to receive your favorable replies. But there was no reply. March 18th. He wrote again to Sir Parampat Singhania, requesting him to send a man from India to supervise work on the temple in New York, as Mr. Singhania had previously suggested. There is no record of any reply to this request. Prabhupada wrote again to Sumati Morarji, requesting her to please send him a mridanga to accompany his chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. He also requested her that in the future, when he would send many men from India, she oblige by giving them free passage on Scindia steamship lines. No reply. As his financial situation became more urgent and his hopes more strained, his support from India withdrew in silence. His unanswered correspondence was itself a kind of message, loud and clear: we cannot help you. Although no one encouraged him, Srila Prabhupada trusted in the order of his spiritual master and the will of Krishna. The word from the Prime Minister regarding government sanction had been a definite no, but he had received another extension of his visa. Now his last hope was Sir Padampat Singh Hania. Prabhupada knew that he was so influential a man in India that if he wanted, he could send the money. He was Prabhupada's final hope. April 2nd. Mr. Singhania did not reply personally. He had his secretary, Mr. Iswara Iyer, write to Prabhupada, thoroughly discouraging his last hopes for purchasing a building in New York. Quote, I regret to write that Sir Parampatji is not interested in the scheme of building a Radha Krishna temple in New York at present. In regard to the inquiry contained in the last paragraph of your letter, Sir Parampatji duly received your books of Srimad Bhagavatam from your Delhi office. Yours faithfully. Unquote. Seeing him from a distance, a tiny figure walking Manhattan streets and avenues among many other tiny figures, a foreigner whose visa had almost run out, we come upon only the external appearance of Srila Prabhupada. These days of struggle were real enough and very difficult, but his transcendental consciousness was always predominant. He was not living in Manhattan consciousness, but was absorbed in dependence upon Krishna, just as when, on the Jaladuta, he had suffered his heart attacks, his reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita had supplied him the nectarine of life. He had already succeeded. Certainly, he wanted to provide Radha and Krishna a temple in New York, but his success was that he was remembering Krishna, even in New York City in the winter of 1965 to 66. Whether the world recognized him or not. Not a day went by when he did not work on Krishna's book, Srimad Bhagavatam. And not a day went by when he did not offer food to Krishna and speak on Krishna's philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, quote, For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost to him, and he is never lost to me. And Krishna assures his pure devotee that my devotee will never be vanquished, unquote. There was never any doubt about this for Prabhupada. The only question was whether Americans would take notice of the pure devotee in their midst. At this point, it seemed that no one was going to take him seriously.